So, a couple of things before we start. If you would please take a moment now and be sure that you have silenced your cell phone and the other devices. Also, following the reading, our speaker will take questions, and then we'll have books for sale in the back, which he would be happy to sign for you. So thank you all for coming to this first event in the 2016-2017 Department of English Rhetoric and Writings Reading Series. Tonight's reading is sponsored by Barry, the Georgia Poetry Circuit, and the Georgia Poets Initiative. It is my great honor and happiness now to introduce to you a poet whose work I so deeply admire and am grateful for, one of my favorite poets, Jericho Brown. Jericho Brown is the recipient of the Whiting Writers Award and fellowships from the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard University, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Guggenheim Foundation. His first book, Please, won the American Book Award, and his second, The New Testament, was awarded the Anisfield Wolf Book Award and was named one of the best poetry books of the year by Library Journal and the Academy of American Poets. His poems have appeared in The Nation, The New Republic, The New Yorker, and multiple volumes of the Best American Poetry series. Brown grew up in Shreveport, Louisiana, and worked as a speechwriter for the mayor of New Orleans before earning his PhD in literature and creative writing from the University of Houston. He also holds an MFA in creative writing from the University of New Orleans and graduated with a BA from Dillard University in 1998. He is currently an associate professor in the creative writing program at Emory University. I don't remember how I hurt myself. Brown's The New Testament begins. The pain mine, long enough for me to lose the wound that invented it, as none of us knows the beauty of our own eyes until a man tells us they are why God made brown. This book, Jericho Brown has said, is about what it means to be a brother, a lover, and a citizen in a country where your brotherhood is criminalized, your love is damned, and your citizenry is thwarted. As one poem puts it, nobody in this nation feels safe, and I'm still a reason why. In writing about the many woundings we have in our country's history inflicted, and still today continue to inflict upon each other, out of fear, out of flawed ideas about race, masculinity, sexuality, and disease. These poems weave the sacred and the secular, testament and testimony, in generative and generous ways, to create a truth at once intimate and public. As Brown himself has said, every love poem is political. Every political poem must fall in love. And these poems do. As passionate as they are compassionate, in writing about domestic violence of the home and the nation, the brutality of fist as well as word, the destructive power of shaming, of being seen only for your race or your sexuality or your illness, Brown is writing of love and survival, of a healing that comes by speaking from your own truest self, refusing to accept as your own the master's names, no matter who wrongly believes themselves to be your master. These poems, then, are for all of us, and in their celebration of embracing the many selves that make up each individual voice, and in the lyrical power, the gorgeous music of their saying, they are indeed redemptive. For tonight, I hope what one Brown poem says will be true. Every last word is contagious. Please welcome Jericho Brown.
That is very nice. That's sweet. Oh, wow. That was so sweet. Wasn't that nice? Can y'all hear me? The microphone was doing sunset shows earlier. Can y'all hear me? I can't. You're saying yes. Thank you. Thank you, go ye green-shirted man. The Green Lantern is back there telling me that y'all have this sound. This has been a really wonderful 2 days. I think I met with every class y'all teach, and every class y'all take, and I met with all of the student organizations, including the football team. And I'm really glad that I got a chance to meet so many students and so many faculty members and so many administrators here. And I'm so glad everyone was so nice to me. It's really the right way to treat me. It's a good idea. I think it's a really good idea to be nice to me. And I really appreciate when people do the right thing. I've had some really wonderful meals. I just had one where I believe I ate all of the sushi ever invented. And I've had some really raucous laughs. And I appreciate all of you for your humor. But more than that, I've had some really wonderful and deep and inspiring conversations about poetry. In particular, it is a wonderful thing to be here with my fellow writers, people like Will, and great poets like Sandy Meek, who I admire so deeply, and whose work means and has meant so much to my own writing and to my life. I'm just going to read a few poems, some of which are from my first book, Please, some of which are from my second book, The New Testament. It's a title my mother's still angry about, and some of which are some newer poems from a book that I'm working on that is tentatively titled A Little Evil. I sort of feel funny reading poems from a book called A Little Evil in this church. But that's where we are. Before I read a poem, if it's necessary, I'll give background, I'll give you some terms. But if not, I'll just go through one poem after another. Sometimes when I'm reading poetry, in order to be able to do this in front of people, I have to imagine reading to myself. The problem with that is that I'll start whispering. So if you see that happening, like, you know, you and Green Lantern, all of y'all just need to look and I'll know that I need to start screaming, which I'll be fine with. Now I hear a cough that sounds like I'm coughing. Am I making that up, or is it just, how is that happening? Who just coughed? Can that person cough again? Is that you? Cough again. Can you do it? Do y'all hear how that sounds? That's just the way the room sounds. I can. So there's a Sandy. Is this life? Like there's a speaker up here or something. You know about this already?
It's just magic.
But it doesn't happen when you do it. Say
It's your
something.
magic.
Okay, but when he talks, say something else. See, do y'all hear that? Y'all don't hear it out there. And y'all think I'm crazy. Come here, Courtney. I just don't want everybody to think I'm crazy. So. Hurry, go fast, I gotta go to meeting. Courtney, just stand right here. Okay. Now say some stuff. Yo! That's crazy, right? So it sounds like you have a microphone. If you're standing here, it sounds computerized. It sounds It sounds like you have a microphone. Oh, you do? Sandy told me to read for 40 minutes. This is how I pad my time. Thank you for your assistance. But that's, somebody should do something on. I feel like this is a dissertation, but whatever. I'm going to start, Rick asked me to hear a poem, and I'm going to start the way I always begin. When I was growing up, no matter what we did, we always began the same way, and that is to begin with prayer. So, prayer of the backhanded, not the palm, not the pear tree switch, not the broomstick, nor the closest extension cord, not his braided belt, but God, bless the back of my daddy's hand, which, holding nothing tightly against me and not wrapped in leather, eliminated the air between itself and my cheek. Remove this dimpled cheek from its fist, unworthy of the hand that hit it. Bring back to life the son who glories in the sin of immediacy, calling it love. God, save the man whose arm, like an angel's wing, may fly backward in fury, whether or not his son stands near. Help me hold in place my blazing jaw as I think to say, excuse me. Labor. I spent what light Saturday sent sweating and learned to cuss, cutting grass for women kind enough to say they couldn't tell the damned difference between their mowed lawns and their vacuumed carpets just before handing over a $5 bill rolled tighter than a joint and asking me in to change a few light bulbs. I called those women old because they wouldn't move out of a chair without my help or walk without a hand at the base of their backs. I called them old, and they must have been. They're all dead now, dead and in the earth I once tended. The loneliest people have the earth to love, and not one friend, their own age, only mothers to baby them, and big sisters to boss them around. Women they want to please and pray for the chance to say, please too. I don't do that kind of work anymore. My job is to look at the childhood I hated and say, I once had something to do with my hands. Again, you are not as tired of the poem as I am of the memory. A returning toothache on either side of the mouth. An ingrown hair beneath the chin. Simple itch, bruising, scratch. And again, I am bundled in Cousin Kenny's clothes from last school year, my hand held by my mother's. We walk as if the house behind us isn't warm enough for my feet. In the dark, we make a few blocks around the one-story neighborhood that I loved. Though nothing I've written tells you this, I want to cut it out of me because right now, it doesn't matter. My mother is asleep on my father's chest. His arm has landed in the same place around her, most of 30 years. Give a man a minute. She's asleep, and I'm typing it all over again. Everywhere, a man is shifting a bit to make his woman more comfortable in his arms. I should have told you this lines ago. We walked back to the house we ran from because my mother loves her husband and his hands, even if laid heavy against her. I know you don't want to believe that, but give a man a minute. We're not done. My father loves his wife and the shape of her body, even if hunched in retreat, their son keeping up. I'm so sick of it. Another awful father scarring this page too, a bruising scratch. We walked back through an open door, and why don't I mention how he kissed my forehead before covering me on the couch that was my bed. Listen, and you can hear them in the next room, planning names for the youngest of us, then making love loud enough for the oldest to learn. The most I can say about this next poem is that it's about high school, the worst time in everybody's life. And it's about something that actually I think it's literally about everything that I learned in high school. The microscopes, heavy and expensive, hard and black, with bits of chrome for points of pride. They looked like baby cannons, the real children of war, and I hated them for that, for what our teachers said they could do, and then I hated them for what they did when we gave up on stealing looks at each other's bodies to press a left or right eye into the barrel and see our actual selves taken down to a cell, then blown back up again. Every atomic thing about a piece of my hair beneath one slide, just as unimportant as anyone else's, growing in that science class where I learned what little difference God saw if God saw me. It was the start of one fear, a tiny one, not much worth mentioning, narrow like a pencil tucked behind the ear, but by some grace lost when I thought about using it to stab someone I secretly loved. A bigger boy who'd advance through those tight hallways, shoving some without saying, "Excuse me," more an insult than a battle, included on an American history exam. Red coats, red blood cells, red bricked education. I can't remember the exact date or grade, but I know when I began ignoring slight alarms that move others to charge or to retreat. I'm a kind of camouflage. I never let on when I don't understand or when I'm scared of conflicts so old they seem to amount to nothing. Dust particles left behind, really, like the viral geography of an expanding country, or like the most recent name of an occupied territory, or like what I imagine, you imagine, when you see a speck like me walking with a white woman. As a human being, there is the happiness that you have and the happiness you deserve. They sit apart from one another, the way you and your mother sat on opposite ends of the sofa after an ambulance came to take your father away. Some good doctor will stitch him up And soon an aunt will arrive to drive your mother to the hospital, where she will settle next to him forever, as promised. She holds the arm of her seat as if she could fall, as if it is the only sturdy thing, and it is, since you've done what you always wanted. You fought your father and won, marred him. He'll have a scar he can see, all because of you. And your mother, the only woman you ever cried for, must tend to it, as a bride tends to her vows, forsaking all others, no matter how sore the injury. No matter how sore the injury has left you, you sit understanding yourself as a human being, finally free, now that nobody's got to love you. This next poem was written, I guess, as a sort of response to finding out about the deaths of people like Victor White in Louisiana, and Jesus Huerta in North Carolina, and Sandra Bland in Texas. That list goes on and on. It's so funny how you can go to research a thing and you find out more than what you ever really wanted to know. Things are even worse than what you imagined that they could be. There are all these cases of people who supposedly committed suicide in very strange ways while in police custody. Bullet points. I will not shoot myself in the head, and I will not shoot myself in the back, and I will not hang myself with a trash bag, and if I do, I promise you, I will not do it in a police car while handcuffed, or in the jail cell of a town I only know the name of because I have to drive through it to get home. Yes, I may be at risk, but I promise you, I trust the maggots and the ants and the roaches who live beneath the floorboards of my house to do what they must to any carcass, more than I trust an officer of the law of the land to shut my eyes like a man of God might, or to cover me with a sheet so clean my mother could have used it to tuck me in. When I kill me, I will kill me the same way most Americans do. I promise you, cigarette smoke, or a piece of meat on which I choke, or so broke I freeze in one of these winters we keep calling worst. I promise that if you hear of me dead anywhere near a cop, then that cop killed me. He took me from us and left my body, which is, no matter what we've been taught, greater than the settlement a city can pay a mother to stop crying, and more beautiful than the brand new shiny bullet fished from the folds of my brain. So thinking about those people and some of these other people from these poems that I've read lead me to this next one, which I guess I should say something about the title, because it's confounded a few people. The title of this poem is a word that, it's like my favorite word in the English language, except that it's not really a word. I grew up in Louisiana and lived in Texas, in East Texas and Houston, Texas. And then I left there and I went to San Diego, and I had no idea that I had an accent before I moved to California. And then I found out that I did. And not only did I find out that I had an accent, I found out that there were words that I grew up thinking everybody said, but that everybody didn't say. And one of those words, now this word does have a definition. It means that person and everyone that you associate with that person, but you can't find that in any dictionary. And the word is nim. And I think y'all might know that word. I'll use it in a sentence. So you see somebody that you haven't seen in a long time, and you know that person, and you know those person's friends or that person's family. You might say, hey, how you doing? How's your mama now? So that's how that word works. Nim. They said to say goodnight and not goodbye. Unplugged the TV when it rained. They hid money in mattresses so to sleep on decisions. Some of their children were not their children. Some of their parents had no birth dates. They could sweat a cold out of you. They'd wake without an alarm telling them to. Even the short ones reached certain shelves. Even the skinny cooked animals too quick to catch. And I don't care how ugly one of them arrived, that one got married to somebody fine. They fed families with change and wiped their kitchens clean. Then another century came. People like me forgot their names. Since I'm reading about that, then I'll shift gears here, read a few persona poems. As y'all know, a persona poem is a poem that is most definitely a poem that is not in the voice of the poet. This first one, though, is actually a persona poem that is in the voice of another poet. It's in the voice of a poet that I think of as my first poet. And I say that with the same affection that we say phrases like first love or first kiss. I remember being a kid in the library and coming across these poems and feeling like I had fallen in love. The only things that you need to know before I read the poem are that his favorite singer was a woman named Bessie Smith, who was also known as the Empress of Blues. There's recently been made a movie, I think on HBO, about her life, starring Queen Latifah, of course. The other thing that you might want to remember is that he was the leading figure of that American literary movement known as the Harlem Renaissance. The poem takes a quote from his testimony before the Senate Committee on Un-American Activities during McCarthyism and the Red Scare of the 1950s. There's one more thing that you might want to remember, and that is, that I think would help with the reading of the poem, or the hearing of the poem, I should say. That is that Langston Hughes wrote what might be his most famous poem, definitely one of his most famous poems, The Negro Speaks of Rivers. If you haven't read that poem, I think it's a good idea that you go Google it as soon as you can. Langston Hughes wrote The Negro Speaks of Rivers when he was 18 years old. Whenever I think about that, whenever I think about the fact that Langston Hughes wrote a poem so great, so wonderful, a poem that if you pick up an anthology of poetry, it's always included. You know, it's a poem that lasts and keeps on giving. Whenever I think about the fact that Langston Hughes wrote The Negro Speaks of Rivers when he was only 18 years old, I really hate Langston Hughes. Langston's Blues. O blood of the river of songs, O songs of the river of blood, let me lie down. Let my words lie sound in the mouths of men repeating invocations, pure and perfect as a moan that mounts in the mouth of Bessie Smith. Blues for the angels kicked out of heaven. Blues for the angels who miss them still. Blues for my people and what water they know. Oh, weary drinkers drinking from the bloody river. Why go to heaven with Harlem so close? Why sing of rivers with fathers of our own to miss? I remember mine and taste a stain like blood coursing the body of a man chased by a mob. I write his running, his sweat. Here he climbs a poplar for the sky, but it is only sky. The river, follow me, you'll see. We tried to fly and learned we couldn't swim. Dear singing river full of my blood, are we as loud under water? Is it blood that binds brothers? Or is it the Mississippi running through the fattest vein of America? When I say home, I mean I wanted to write some lines. I wanted to hear the blues but here I am, swimming the river again. What runs through the fat veins of a drowned body? What America can a body call home? When I say Congo, I mean blood. When I say Nile, I mean blood. When I say Euphrates, I mean if only you knew what blood we have in common. So much in Louisiana, they call a man like me red. And red was too dark for my daddy, and my daddy was too dark for America. He ran like a man from my mother and me, and my mother's sobs are the songs of Bessie Smith, who wears more feathers than death. Oh, the death my people refuse to die. When I was 18, I rode down the river, though I couldn't win a race. Climbed a tree that winter, then fell flat on my wet, red face. Line after line, I read all the time, but there was nothing I could do about race. Janis Joplin recorded the Gershwin Standard Summertime with Big Brother and the Holding Company for their 1968 chart-topping album, Cheap Thrills. She died of a heroin overdose in 1970. She was 27 years old when she died. Track 5, Summertime, as performed by Janis Joplin. God's got his eye on me, but I ain't a sparrow. I'm more like a lawnmower. No, a chainsaw. Anything that might mangle each manicured lawn in Port Arthur, a place I wouldn't return to if the mayor offered me every ounce of oil my daddy cans at the refinery. My voice, I mean, ain't sweet. Nothing nice about it. It won't fly, even with Jesus watching. I don't believe in Jesus. The Baxter boys climbed a tree just to throw persimmons at me. The good and perfect gifts from above hit like lightning, leave bruises. So I lied. I believe. But I don't think God likes me. The girls in the locker room slapped dirty pads across my face. They called me bitch. But I never bit back. I ain't a dog. Chainsaw, I say. My voice hacks at you. I bet I tear my throat. I try so hard to sound jagged. I get high and say one thing so many times, like Willie Baker, who worked across the street. I saw some kids whip him with a belt while he repeated, please. School out, summertime, and the living lashed. Mama said I should be thankful that the town's worse to coloreds than they are to me, that I grow out of my acne. God must love Willie Baker, all that leather, and still a please that sounds like music. See, I wouldn't know a sparrow from a mockingbird. The band plays, I just belt out, please. This tune ain't half the blues. I should be thankful I get high and moan like a lawnmower so nobody notices. I'm such an ugly girl. I'm such an ugly girl. I try to sing like a man. Boys call boy. I turn my face to God. I pray. I wish I could pour oil on everything green in Port Arthur. So since I'm reading poems in other people's voices, I want to share this poem with y'all that I fell in love with this past summer. These are the last two sections. You know, it's really funny when you go to a college and somebody's your teacher and you see them every day and you have no idea because you don't bother to find these things out. That, you know, there's like a walking jewel of a poet among you. This is a poem, it's a longer poem. I'm gonna read the last two sections of the poem hope I pronounce this correctly. Allodicotoma. Allodicotoma. How do you say this, Ruth? You know? It means quiver tree. This is a poem by a young woman named Sandra Meek. How can the rooted migrate except by seed, generation by generation? Night more prescience than reprieve. Those brilliants hung above you, born of fire, not ice. Nothing that might yet dissolve into rain. The sky like a graveyard, cluttered by the dead or the undead. Anything but the living, forecasting a world where beauty belongs solely to the stone, what even the angels will be made of. Twilight, you the very architecture of night, the rising sun inked to reach to each stroke of your crown, as if you weren't its slave, as if by shedding its stars, sky could become light itself, not a future with no room for anything, not fire, not for your shallow hold to the still blackened stone sill, not for the shrinking skeleton of your lingering, not the white lie of your trunk against the sky's bleaching blue stare, not you at all. Quiver tree, cocoa bone, vanishing point of memory and mirage, tendered to the wake of that clocked fire, what always watched over you. That's good, huh? That's so poem about a tree. Isn't that great? Y'all should give her a raise or something. She's very good. She's really, I think she's really good. You know, if y'all want to mistreat her, we'll take her anyway. I'll read just a couple more of my poems, maybe just a few more. Sandra asked that I read this poem and arrested him. About 8 years ago, maybe a little less than 8 years ago, Henry Louis Gates was coming home from a trip. Henry Louis Gates, who's like a professor of African American Studies at Harvard University, was coming home from a trip and had forgotten his keys or something like that. He was trying to get in his house, and he couldn't get in his house, so he did what we do when we can't get in our house. He tried to see if he could open a window, and an officer came to the house and arrested him. And of course, Henry Louis Gates felt as if this must have happened because he was black, because everyone there knows that Henry Louis Gates, lives in that house. He was wearing a suit, so why would he be breaking into his house in a suit? You know, he was sort of bothered about this whole thing. Probably not sober, right? And somebody asked Barack Obama about it. Barack Obama was the then new president who I think at that point didn't understand not to ever say anything about anything. And then Barack Obama got in trouble because he said that that police officer had acted, his word was stupidly. And people were very upset with him about saying that. And so it got to a point, and I was upset, not about, I was upset about the happening itself, the event itself, but I was really upset that this was really taking up a lot of my news time. Because I was like, certainly there's something happening in the world that I should be knowing about that I'm not learning about right now. And it got to a point where Barack, do y'all remember any of this? And Barack Obama had to like invite them to his house, to the White House, to have a beer. Do y'all remember that foolishness?
Oh, yeah.
It was just a mess. Like, I was like, all of this is happening in my world. Like, and this poem is interesting to me because it very clearly makes use of those events But it's not about any of that at all. Like it doesn't turn out to be about that particular event. And yet there are elements from it coming through me into the poem. And I'm happy to read it because I think that is an example of some stuff that I was visiting all these classes. I've been talking about this, how these things sort of mix in with other things that you're thinking and you're feeling and seeing and experiencing. And that mix of things is what turns out to be the poem. Homeland. I knew I had jet lag because no one would make love to me. All the men thought me a vampire. All the women were women. In America that year, black people kept dreaming that the president got shot. Then the president got shot, breaking into the White House. He claimed to have lost his keys. What's the proper name for a man caught stealing into his own home? I asked a few passengers. They replied, Jigger. After that, I took the red eye. I took to his side deep as the end of a day in the dark fields below us. Some slept, but nobody named security ever believes me. Confiscated my Atripla, my Celexa, my cortisone, my Klonopin, my Flexeril, my Zyrtec, my Nazaril, my Percocet, my Ambien. Nobody in this nation feels safe, and I'm still a reason why. Every day, something gets thrown away on account of long history, or hair, or fingernails, or yes, of course, my fangs. Dear Dr. Frankenstein, I too know the science of building men out of fragments in little light, where I'll be damned if lightning don't strike, as I forget one may have a thief's thumb, another a murderer's arm, and watch the men I've made leave like an idea I meant to write down, like a vehicle stuck in reverse, like the monster God came to know the moment Adam named animals and claimed Eve, turning from heaven to her as if she was his to run. No word, he said, could be tamed. No science, no design, nothing taken gently into his hand, or your hand, or mine. Nothing we erect is our own. Stand. Peace on this planet, our guns glowing hot. We lay there together as if we were getting something done. It felt like planting a garden or planning a meal for people who still need feeding. All that touching, barely touching, not saying much, not adding anything, the cushion of it, the skin, occasional sigh, all seemed like work worth mastering. I'm sure somebody died while we made love. Somebody killed somebody black. I thought then of holding you as a political act. I may as well have held myself. We didn't stand for one thought, didn't do a damn thing. And though you left me, I'm glad we didn't.